Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and alongside me is Mac
Good evening.
and Gio.
What is good?
And today we are going to be reviewing match day 23 of the Premier League, and also what else is going on in the rest of the football world, which includes some Champions League and Europa League matchups to come. Before we get into it, though, don't forget to follow us on our social medias, both on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is at house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. Lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. But let's get straight into it, guys. To open up this first part of the podcast, Gio, you were mentioning it before we started. This is midweek game. There's a midweek game taking place, and it's not just the Champions League. It's actually what we consider, I think, the most exciting, most looked at game for the EPL this season. First place taking on second place, Arsenal versus Manchester City. Of course, there was a game that was postponed earlier in the year, but now there's no more waiting. This match will be taking place midweek, and at Arsenal, a lot of eyes will be on it, and there's going to be a lot for both teams to prove. But just to give you guys a brief overview, the two sides. Arsenal's first, obviously, 21 games played with 51 points, and Man City are second, 22 games played with 48 points. I guess, Gio, to start off with you, what do you expect from this Arsenal-Man City game?
I'm expecting both managers to be very tactical. I don't think it'll be a goal fest as because Holland and things of that nature. I'm not expecting a very high goal scoring affair. It's gonna be very tactical from both sides. Obviously, it's gonna be the student against the master. The Ninja Turtle against the Master Splinter, as I like to call it. But hey, I think no matter how you look at it, Arsenal are still the team that's more informed. I think both teams are going to be smart about how they kind of go about their attack. But I think for the most part, Arsenal is going to be the team that's going to be more on the front foot in terms of attacking, in terms of pushing the tempo a little more. I think Man City, because of, say, their form as of late, a little less confident in that sense. But if Arsenal can be the team that puts the front foot forward and kind of controls the tempo as you may, I think they'll have a very good day midweek.
Okay, Mac, I guess same question to you, but if you can give us a little bit of sort of what took place leading up to this game. Obviously, Arsenal tied Brentford 1-1 in their game over the weekend, and Manchester City won 3-1 at home to Aston Villa. Do you sort of echo the same thoughts that Gio has? Arsenal sort of better form, Man City got the win over the weekend, but still have some questions about them. What do you think, Matt?
Oh, I would say if we're going off the most recent game, Man City are probably, in my opinion, the team in better form. Their display against Aston Villa was dominating. They had tweaks to their formation. Bernardo Silva playing in a deep lying playmaker position without really any natural wide backs on the pitch. It's a unique change that Man City haven't traditionally played with. Will be interesting to see if that carries over. I doubt it. Considering both wingers for Arsenal, Martinelli, on his day, maybe he's not having the best run of form right now, but even if Trossard were to come in and take his place, can be a trouble. And on the other side, Saka is Arsenal's biggest problem that Man City have to really deal with. So I wouldn't be surprised to see if we see a shift back to more of a traditional back four. But just from the most recent performance, Man City were absolutely dominating Aston Villa, and Aston Villa were, in my opinion, very fortunate to be even keep the scoreline as kind of close as it was. Where especially in the first half, they looked like far and away probably the best they've played thus far this season, in my opinion. Whereas Arsenal, I would argue, probably had their worst performance at home this season against Brentford. They were fortunate to come out in some ways with a 1-1 draw. Also, unfortunate in regards to the calls of VAR going against them, really. But overall, you can't really credit their performance. They didn't do more than enough to be able to make sure that they're out of distance away from Brentford in that game and didn't perform very well. So on form, I disagree with you a little bit there. But overall, I think it's going to be very interesting in a matchup because both teams are mirrors of each other where they try to do very, very similar things in attack in terms of a pressing, in terms of really having an attacking front five, a defending kind of back five at the same time. It's very interesting that the way that they want to be able to kind of control and maintain possession. Both teams are the top 5 in goals, passes, completed passes, shots. So you know what you're going to get a very, very heavy attacking threat from both teams. It'll just be interesting to see for who's going to dominate those aspects of the games in terms of passes for longer and be more clinical in those key moments. And I think that's what really will decide who will come out and win this game.
Yeah, clinical is, I guess, the only way you can describe how City performed against Aston Villa in the first half. Apart from Haaland getting his goal, they were firing up on all cylinders, I would say. Kevin De Bruyne was back to what we can, expect his old self. Obviously, they overloaded that midfield with Bernardo Silva playing as a left back, makeshift. But really, he was just occupying those spaces and picking up the ball deep so that he could facilitate and create chances for City. But even though Haaland did get, with an assist for this game, he is questionable for Wednesday, having come off in the first half. Now, Gio, I'm not sure if it's because of an injury. He did have a collision with Emi Martinez in the game, but not sure if that was a problem or if it's just a rest. But Gio, given the fact that Pep always overthinks and shifts his lineups for games that are very, very important, what do you expect the lineup to look like for City? Do you think he's going to go with something more traditional, or he's going to throw us another curveball and switch it up?
I don't think he can afford to throw a curveball at this point. He needs to come with a set plan, and again, we've seen City drop more points than we'd expect over the past couple of weeks or month or so, and now it kind of pushes them back. Now it's backs against the wall, and they have to perform. And ideally it's 3 points. So he has to put his best lineup out, not best 11, his best lineup out. Hopefully that doesn't include Jack Grealish. And it does include KDB, and hopefully we see Riyad Mahrez. But without Haaland, I don't think they'll be, as big of a trouble as people assume they could be in. I think Julian Alvarez is quite good, and actually quite fits Pep's kind of system and play style a little bit more. Again, as we've seen before, he doesn't really like to send that long ball and give Haaland that open space run, as he did kind of earlier season. That's where kind of Haaland racked up more of his goals. But he is a huge threat in the box, regardless of the fact. So it's kind of give and take. Julian Alvarez does fit into the Pep system quite well. And I think either way, he'll have a strong lineup. And you just make sure KDB, Bernardo Silva are on, Gundogan are on, unlike their last couple of games where they kind of come on in subs and kind of almost cost them the game.
Okay. I guess same question to you, Mac. I guess regarding Arsenal as well, are there any weird lineup changes both teams would you foresee both teams making, or is it going to be very similar to sort of that cup match game they had, even though obviously some players were rested here and there? And what do you think, Mac?
So I think Arsenal, the only question really is because they've actually had to make the few changes in the starting 11 thus far this season in comparison to all other Premier League teams. So it's been very consistent. They've been fortunate in regards to injuries. And in terms of foreign-wise, everyone's been performing very well thus far this season. I guess the main question will be with Trossard coming on the back of scoring a goal after coming off from Matinee, who has had back-to-back, I would argue, kind of poor performances where he hasn't kind of shown out, made a difference, been as creative, been as aggressive. I think that might be the only question that we might see some sort of change in that aspect. I doubt it still, but if there were to be a change, that would be the only one. Whereas for against Pep's Man City, I know Gio was highlighting it, is that there's going to be a plethora of changes from this Aston Villa game. Like I brought up earlier, Ake is probably going to come into a back four, so that automatically means you're choosing between Bernardo Silva or Godongan that's going to play, unless one of them is going to play on the wing, which that's unlikely. So you're going to see a lot more rotation from that City team, where you're going to have more questions about who's going to be on the pitch and maybe more how they're going to play. But Arsenal, you kind of know what you're going to get at this point. However, I do think it's going to kind of be, and Pep's generally done this in these big matchups in the Premier League specifically, especially in League, where he doesn't make the changes there. It's more often he's more stressed and more worried about the one-off cup competitions or Champions League, where he's like, okay, in this one game, our kind of roadmap of how to be successful more times than not, it can go wrong. Do we need to make a change? Versus in a league, since you have more games, there's a lot less variance, where he's going to kind of stick to his overarching philosophy, I think. So I think we're actually going to get kind of a high chance, kind of back-to-back action, kind of both sides dominating possession, trying to create opportunities, see if they can get on the break at each other for long sections of this game, in my opinion. So I feel like it's going to be a carbon copy of how they like to perform against each other. And I think it won't be too dissimilar. I know it's a long time ago since they played this match. It was like last year in their second matchup, I think almost a year to the day, where Arsenal, I think, just lost 2-1, if I remember correctly. So I think it could be something similar, where it is high octane, high action, and a lot more enthralling than their more recent cup match, in my opinion.
Yeah, obviously there's going to be Champions League games going on, but I think a lot of eyes are still going to be in this game, a midweek Premier League game, which is interesting, and it just shows how much is riding on this game. Joe, you mentioned City can they go ahead if they do win this game? They could go ahead based on goal difference, I believe.
Yes.
If they do win, but obviously Arsenal do have that game in hand. But if Arsenal win, then they create more of a separation. Obviously, hold create some separation, and then have a firm hold still on sort of that first place position, with another matchup between them later on in the season to come. But I guess for me, just wanted to bring up, obviously City were very impressive on the weekend for the first half. Then Haaland came off, a couple of substitutions were made, and then Foden came back on, which is interesting because he hasn't featured, and I'm not sure if he will feature as much in this game. But one thing that has been happening over the whole season is City's defense has been a question. Now, it could be easy for me to pick at holes that are there when City is winning 3-0. Maybe some concentration levels are dropping from that City team. But still, there's a question, I think, to add. City, with their not really being able to keep a clean sheet over the last couple of games. Obviously, they've conceded a lot more goals, it seems like, this season over the last couple, compared to the last couple seasons. And Arsenal are scoring pretty much every game. I think the only game that they didn't score was that Everton game 2 weeks ago. But apart from that, at home, Arsenal are a team to be reckoned with. And so, for my prediction, I'll give it to you guys first, and we can debate about this, Gio. I think it's going to be a 2-2 tie. A lot of action, back and forth. City is going to be obviously coming out to try and dominate possession. Arsenal will have their spells too. Man City will score, but there are going to be periods in time where City lose that concentration, and Arsenal, being so deadly this season, will get their chances and find their way to score as well. So, yeah, 2-2 tie for me. Hope it's a high-scoring game, and hope it doesn't disappoint us midweek. What do you think, Gio?
I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but I do think City are going to have Arsenal fans' asses clenched, and they're going to win 2-1. But again, I don't think Arsenal should be too worried with the extra game in hand. I think losing this one game wouldn't be detrimental to their title chase. I think they still need to just focus on the games that they can win, and quite easily. I think that's the most important point with the City squad that's dropped as many points as they have. You can expect more points to be dropped. So I think they just need to stay focused. But I do think City will edge this one. I do think Haaland will play, and I think he will give the back line much trouble, especially on those set pieces, especially from those balls in. whether it's from Phil Foden, whether it's from Bernardo Silva, I think that will give Arsenal's backline quite a bit of trouble.
And okay, and Mac, what do you think?
I'm on board with you, Ray, in terms of a 2-2 tie. I think if you were to ask both managers, would you take a tie? I think everyone would say yes. I think everyone would be okay with that, to be honest. I think Arsenal's goal in this game, if they just come out and don't lose it, they're still in a decent position. And Man City, same thing. Is that they don't lose it, they're still within shout. They have their game at home against Arsenal at the Etihad, so they can still feel comfortable in closing the distance. So I think that's more so where it might end up, where if it's kind of let's say the 75th minute, the game's 2-2, I think both managers would try to go for it, but have some reservations about it at the same time, versus there's not too much pressure on either team to win. I think especially if Arsenal were to lose this game, considering that would put them winless in the last 3 Premier League games, if that were to happen, it would start to create too much pressure, a lot of tension. Is it back to last year? Stuff that around the conversation. So obviously, I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to lean towards a 2-2 tie where is that excitement, there are their goals, because I think both teams can really provide that for us and create a very enthralling matchup. So I'm going to go with a 2-2 tie.
Okay, obviously we're gonna be covering all of that in our next podcast. So we're gonna take a break here, guys, and then we'll be back covering some more action from this weekend. So stay with us. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We're gonna continue our podcast, just covering the remaining action from this weekend's Premier League games. First game we're gonna continue discussing is Chelsea 1, West Ham 1. Gio, connection from the 2 January transfer signings from Chelsea. Enzo Fernandez assisting Joao Felix. Looked good, can't lie. Chelsea looked, I think, more threatening, even though they didn't really score. And West Ham, even though they haven't really been able to put up a good run of form, still come up with a positive result. What do you think, Gio, for that?
I think, look, West Ham easily, although possession says otherwise, there's a point in time where you can notice, like, a lot of possession doesn't mean domination of the game. West Ham were finding other ways to get their chances, and they did. They had 10 shots, and although only 2 were on target, there were a lot of times where they had Chelsea backpedaling and kind of had their chances to put away the game, particularly late in the game, where a goal was called offside. Quite unfortunate, because I called a 2-1 West Ham win. Would have loved to see it happen. Honestly, I was getting ready that morning, just eating breakfast, and almost choked on my coffee when they scored. But, VAR had to ruin my morning somehow. But no, I thought West Ham felt great. I think they should be very happy with a point here. I think Chelsea, again, should be disappointed in terms of, obviously getting to a good start, but being more consistent, adding on to the good start, continuing into the second half with that good start. So yeah, I think they still have a lot of work to do in terms of, again, finding the best 11 to put on, and no, not the best 11, the best team to put on. And no, I think Graham Potter is still improving, week by week, but I still think they have much work to do.
I mean, they have the quality of players. Even though Mudryk, for the second week in a row, I believe, hasn't completed the 90 minutes. It's still, they have quality throughout that team, and potentially could have had a winner, Mac, with that penalty shout, I guess, review where Souček was going in slide to block that shot, hits his hand. Obviously, discussions everywhere about that being a penalty. But how did you see this game, Mac?
So overall, in terms of West Ham, you knew exactly what they were going to do, exactly how they were going to approach the game. They have failed to win 10 of the last London derbies in the Premier League, drawing 2 and losing 8. So they were happy just to lash on to any point that they could get. So you knew exactly the type of approach that they're going to have. They're very successful in doing so. And in the key moments of the game, they did what they needed to do. Because they had more touches inside the box, opposing team's box, than Chelsea, as well as had just as many shots on target inside the box. But you wouldn't be able, if you're watching the game, that's not the first thing that will come to your mind, because Chelsea outpossessed them at 72% to 28%. Chelsea had so many more passes, were able to do so much more with the ball. The problem is, if you really track and kind of, if I'm going to critique Chelsea, is that they're playing the way that they want to, Graham Potter want them play in the first 2 phases of the game. In the final third, if you watch, kind of look at a heat map of the players' positioning most of the time, they're all arching around the outside the 18 because everybody wants to come short to be able to pick up the ball. So it's way too much of an overlap and similarities of play styles. Like Joao Felix and Kai Havertz, there's not much difference in what either player wants to be able to try to do with the ball and the positions they want to take up. But there's no one to create that second layer of offense that kind of wants to be able to do the dirty work of running in behind, to be able to latch onto certain balls, to be able to create kind of a different type of threat that's going to leave defenders with more questions. So overall from Chelsea, you can see that the stage can be set in terms of how to play in possession, but with all the money they spent, they still don't have a striker, and their only really recognized striker is out of their Champions League squad in Aubameyang. He was taken out; he's not going to be part of the team. So even though you can look at it a lot of positives for Chelsea in terms of that side of it, it still ends up being, in my opinion, kind of poor on that end because you still have so many questions that you haven't answered, and this has been a consistent theme for Chelsea since Diego Costa was back under Conte. That there has been a kind of a striker hole in that team. So it's still very concerning there. I do want to be able to touch on kind of the penalty show. That was clearly a penalty. I don't know how that wasn't a call. It's one of many VAR mistakes over the course from the weekend. I think I would argue 3 of the biggest teams in the Premier League were impacted, and we'll probably touch on all of them. But again, it's not an understanding of. A lot of times, VAR is supposed to be there in terms of that penalty show, is where if a player is going down and let's say they're kind of bracing their fall. Versus you can see Souček, he extends his arm out to be able to stop the ball. So it's just a lack of, in my opinion, understanding of what a defender is going to do in that position and their thought process from the kind of the video system free. So even though I am quite harsh on Chelsea in the way that they did approach the game in attacking final third sense, you still should feel hard done as a Chelsea fan, considering that is an easily fixable mistake. And you could have easily won this game 2-1.
Yeah, it sounds like, Mac, what you're saying, and I'm going to put words in your mouth. Chelsea should be disappointed to have, I guess, come out with only a tie. Gio, do you sort of echo that same thought?
Yeah, no. I absolutely think Chelsea should be disappointed. Again, like I said, they still have work to do. It's about their consistency levels throughout the game, and like Mac mentioned, a lot of players do a lot of similar things. So I don't think the best team is out on the pitch. I think he kind of is putting more so the names out there, the best 11 individual players that he can kind of put out that week. So yeah, I think they should be disappointed. I think West Ham should be happy they picked up a point against a considerably stacked side in terms of their depth and name. So yeah, no, I think a very good week for West Ham.
It's almost as if Chelsea would find useful a striker they have on loan in Serie A by the name of Romelu Lukaku. Anyways, just a thought. They need a big number 9. They have one out on loan. But anyways, speaking of disappointment, and I'm going to have to come back to Gio on this, a team that should be disappointed, Spurs, after losing 4-1 away at Leicester. They did, of course, go in the lead with a goal from Bentancur, sort of like a goal scramble in the corner, but 4 goals without a response after that result at Man City. Sorry, against Man City. Gio, what do you think about this Spurs team?
I think it's great. I mean, me personally, I think it's great. You guys know how biased I am, but to be honest, I think it just shows their lack of focus. You can't be considered a top Premier League side if you go in and out of weeks, not knowing how you're going to perform, especially after playing such a big game against Man City, of course, like you mentioned, and then coming in where you can pick up points again. Although Leicester have been of good form recently, for a bigger club of your stature, if you want to put yourself or consider yourself in that stature, you have to look at games like this as, okay, yeah, this is another game we can pick up points from, to keep us in the top 5 or drag us closer into the top 4. But no, they just didn't look up for it. I think Eric Dyer looked horrible. I think all in all, their defense was Swiss cheese. It just didn't look good at all. And the players right above that defensive line didn't help either. So I think as a group, I think they should be quite disappointed in this loss.
It's interesting you mentioned the players just in front of that defensive line didn't really help. Bentancur, the goal scorer, as we know now, is going to be out for the rest of the season, picking up an ACL injury, which, I mean, we're going to talk more about Spurs. So I don't want to add too much onto it. But Mac, what did you think about this performance?
I thought overall, it seemed like the Spurs team kind of lacked intensity in a lot of ways in terms of being able to put pressure on the ball, the work ethic to be able to come back in transition. They did well to be able to get a good lead in the game, but it seems like as soon as that did happen, they shut down and kind of just allowed Leicester to really dominate the midfield. James Maddison was absolutely influential, being able to pick up space behind Højbjerg and Bentancur, kind of in between that and those two and Dyer, and it was able to dictate play between him and Iheanacho way too many times. And that should have been an obvious threat where Spurs are able to kind of know, okay, this is the type of way that they're going to play. If they're playing Maddison in the middle there, here are things we could potentially do to be able to stop him and exploit him, because there are other ways to be able to counter this setup by Leicester. But it seems like as soon as the tying goal came in from Leicester, there was only going to be one team to really win it. I think what might be underplayed here, and I know that we've probably ragged on him a little bit too much, but Christian Romero was a huge miss for Spurs. Of course, him having a red card, and they had to play Tanganga, who is, let's just say, if you think Romero's bad, he is so much worse. So it's unfortunate in that way, because it was just time in, time after again, the space between him and Pedro Porro, who was making his Premier League debut, which obviously you would want to have maybe a little better of a security blanket to get adjusted into the league. And those two as a duo or kind of getting cut through like a knife through butter. So it's unfortunate that way for them to be able to start off like that, but you can just see it happening time in, time again, and the attacking players for Leicester realizing, oh, we have an easy way to get through this. So much so, when Harvey Barnes had a goal called offside by millimeters, he basically put up the exact same position, cutting through the exact same players to score a similar type of goal, but just outside the box this time. So it was consistently poor from Spurs. And you can hear Conte after the match talking about, you know what, my second time here in the Premier League, it's great, but my true love is still Italy, of course. My first love. I'll always go back to it. So he's just like setting up the red carpet to be able to find a way to leave. So it's unfortunate if you're a Spurs fan, but especially coming after a great result against Manchester City and a great performance. But it's just like a bad team, kind of a lower level team, only pulling up and winning against kind of one of the better teams in the league. You got to win. You got to win the easy games. You got to be able to make sure that you're getting those points, because those picked up points against City become meaningless if you lose the next week against a Leicester City team.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to talk a little more about Spurs, but hey, Leicester back-to-back 4 goals scored. 4 goals scored. Those questions that we had, I guess, with them really not being able to score and also lacking defensively. Hey, Brendan Rodgers is slowly turning it around, and it looks like they have something up there. Iheanacho looks like a man in form. Maddison obviously coming back, playing well. Harvey Barnes getting involved with the goals as well. And also, just a word on that Mendy goal, the tying goal was a banger as well. So glad to see that from Leicester. So let's stop talking about Leicester Spurs now, and let's move on to another game that took place. Man U got another win this weekend. Now this is a result that they had against the midweek opposition, Leeds. Gio, what did you think about this game?
Important. Definitely important. They didn't look too cohesive in the first half as I was watching. And again, as you go and you watch the games, you notice more of what they're missing in the midfield. There are times that you think, okay, Fred is doing enough, or Fred and Sabitzer are doing enough, and then there are times where you're just screaming for a Casemiro or an Eriksen to really make that difference. But they got the draw earlier against Leeds. And then to get a 2-0 result, I think was huge. Obviously, great play in the second half. great goal from Marcus Rashford, and then a great individual effort from Garnacho. Good way to tough one out here. But yeah, those are definitely important points you want to pick up against, again, like how we described the Spurs, against these lower bottom table sides. You do want to scrape out as many points as possible.
And that's a great result, but obviously it wasn't the best start for Man U. They didn't concede within the first minute of this game, but they did concede quite a lot of chances. Somerville had at least 3 himself. And so there are questions, I think, about that, I guess, makeshift back line Man U put out, obviously with an eye out for their midweek game, which we'll cover a little bit later. But Mac, how did you see this game?
So I actually think it was a little bit different, and I had a lot more questions in regards to their attacking front four and their positioning. That for me was much more confounding, and I feel like it caused a lot of the problems because in attack there was, for the first 60 minutes, there was absolutely no movement from the front four. There was no creativity. There was no one trying to be able to make any runs behind because Rashford was playing tradition out wide, right, and not really having an impact on the game. And it was really up to Bruno and Weghorst in the middle to be able to try to create something. I felt like, at the very least, that there was not a willing runner at all. So it seemed like a lot of the games, and this is tough on him, but Harry Maguire or Luke Shaw or Malacia at the back, it just seems like they're standing and not being able to progress the ball forward at all because there was not really any great movement whatsoever in front of them. So for the first 60 minutes, if you're a Manchester United fan, it was an absolutely horrendous performance, and you're fortunate, in my opinion, to be in the game. Considering the chances that they get up, and I would argue that there should have been a penalty called against Manchester United for Harry Maguire's push on Bamford in the first half. So that was a key miss, another VAR mistake there, in my opinion. But from the 60 minutes on, when Jadon Sancho and Malacia came off for Martinez and Garnacho, that was the clear separation. Where now you had an attacking a winger wanting to be able to make runs behind. Rashford was able to try to be able to make runs behind, and Bruno and Weghorst were able to kind of show in possession and try to create different layers of attack. So that for me was the clear separation. Where pre 60 minutes, probably I would argue some of the poorest minutes Manchester United played this season thus far. But the last 30 minutes and what they've been able to do, it's full credit to Ten Hag. We're realizing, okay, I've tried it so long for here, it's not working well. We need to go out and win this game. Let me make this change to see if it can work. And to his credit, it paid off. I think in the final 15 minutes of the game, they scored 15 goals this season, something like that. It's the highest in the Premier League over the course of the last 15 minutes. So that's another credit to Ten Hag, where he realizes these changes and is able to make these adjustments. At the same time, though, you can still ask, why doesn't he make changes at the beginning of the game that are going to set them up? But you got to take what you can in regards to this, as well as coming up with full 3 points. So overall, it's great because there's still a lot of things that they can improve on, and they still got the 3 points.
Yeah, perfectly said. There's room for improvement, but the result is there. And furthermore, Leeds, again, without a manager, playing really well, getting a lot of chances, unable to score. And this is the Premier League. The game is 90 minutes. They played well, outchanced Man U, I think, in the first 80 minutes. And then you get Rashford back-to-back headed goals, and on this run of form, he's going to give you something like that. And then Garnacho looked bright when he came on. That burst of speed to get himself free, and that finish really puts another positive on this Man U side, because now you could make the argument there's depth in that Man U team, which is always good to have on your team. So definitely a great result for Man U. And moving on to a game that took place today, I think we should take some time now, Gio. You and I, we had Everton with we predicted Everton would have a positive result here. And honestly, Mac, I'm very, very surprised at how Everton lined up, because you'd think, given the fact that Liverpool conceded 3 goals, were not able to score in their last game against Wolves, Everton would start strong, and it was, I think, completely the opposite. I think, unfortunately, Sean Dyche got it wrong in terms of picking out that starting lineup. He went with a similar midfield, but in terms of going forward, I think Sims started the match, whereas I think if he started off with maybe Dominic Calvert-Lewin was injured for this game, but I think if he started with Maupay or Demarai Gray, someone who prove a threat to running behind that Liverpool high line, I think it would have been a better choice. And then in midfield, Liverpool started with Satic, Fabinho, and Henderson. And it looked, I think, more balanced today because instead of having just Fabinho as the sole pivot, they had a two in midfield with Henderson just making runs off of the right-hand side. And it looked a little more balanced for Liverpool. Chances were created, and thankfully, as a Liverpool fan, they were taken. But honestly, it wasn't, I think, the most impressive performance. It was a good performance at Anfield, which was very much needed considering the results in the last couple games. But Mac, what did you think?
No, I think this is absolutely what I'll anticipate going into the game is that Everton are going to come out and kind of just going to be mentally battered because this fixture they've historically never done well in, and they're going to come in probably with the thought process they're probably going to lose. So in the mindset already, Liverpool are going to have a great chance, and it could be potentially a good platform to be able to build off of. I don't want to take really anything from this game. I'll probably take everything with a grain of salt for Liverpool, and it's really okay. How are they going to perform next week? Do they have some sort of consistency with their approach in games in terms of a system? I do like this change of having two defensive midfielders. I think that's very, very beneficial because it's really just been let's put this nicely, with the lack of defensive presence that they have right now, having more coverage instead of having a sieve beside Fabinho and Henderson is going to be beneficial. And unfortunately, a lot of Liverpool midfielders, they really only have one presence, just that forward-thinking presence, which they can be fantastic at, but that's not what's really really needed right now in this moment. So I think this adjustment was smart from Klopp, and it'll be interesting to see if that does carry forward into the future matches, and if this performance does, as I said, carry forward as well.
Okay, and Gio, we predicted a more, I guess, Everton to give more out of this game. But do you think there's any, I guess, positives from this Everton game? Do you think this Everton team, is this just a one-off game, or is there a plan that Sean Dyche will instill in this Everton side to hopefully keep them up?
I mean, I think they're slowly gaining more confidence. I don't think you can take everything away from them this game. I think there were there were glimpses, slight bright spots, but I think if they started say Neil Malpai or Damari Gray, I think it would have been much better than Sims. This was Sims' first start in 14 months in the Premier League. He's only started one other time, and that was for a Southampton side, I believe. But yeah, definitely not the right match to start him in. I understand, why Sean Dyche might have, to get a different feeling, to keep the Liverpool defenders on their toes. But there were times where the Liverpool backline was pressured, and I think with a more experienced player like a Damari Gray or a Neil Malpai, that it could have ended up differently. Like, for example, just right off the top of my head, the chance where Matip missed that clearance, and then Sims got the ball. I think a Damari Gray would have been more clinical in that situation. I think Sims kind of overthought it, kind of took a second touch, which kind of got Gomez into his spot and obviously blocked the shot. I think just picking the right guys, getting more familiar with the team. I think they have a lot of positives to go off on. And again, they were very unlucky to not go up 1-0. Off the corner, hitting off the post, and then
exactly
that quick counterattack that Liverpool is known for. Obviously, it clicked there. It hasn't clicked much this season, but it did click there. So a lot of credit to Darwin Nunez on that one. So I think all in all, it was Liverpool taking their chances and capitalizing on their opportunities, which is what they are known for. So much credit to Liverpool, but also I don't think Everton should hang their heads too low on this one.
Okay, yeah. Other bright spots are Firmino and Jota did come back, so they did get a couple minutes here in this game. So moving forward, there is a little more depth going forward for Liverpool, and so we'll see how that is embedded in their next upcoming games. But just to wrap up this part of the podcast, I know we had a couple other games to discuss, but just thought about mentioning one of the sort of predictions that we had for teams to get relegated this season. Southampton have parted ways with Nathan Jones. He was on the receiving end of a 2-1 loss over the weekend to Wolves, who were down to 10 men. And just wanted to read out that he had 8 games in charge of Southampton, 1 win and 7 losses. And the way Southampton is playing right now doesn't look like it's a great way for them to be at the moment. So we're going to wrap up this part of the podcast and then take a break, and then we'll be back previewing some of the other European matches coming up. So stay with us. Back to Hustle Footy, guys. We're going to wrap up this podcast with, obviously, the upcoming games midweek, and obviously Champions League is back. 2 really big games in the Champions League taking place this week are AC Milan Spurs. Firstly, Spurs obviously coming off that big loss that we mentioned above. No Bentancur, a hole in that midfield. Conte talking about wanting to go back to Italy. And conveniently enough, they're going to face an Italian team who is not in the best run of form. Currently, they are 5th in the Serie A, I believe. They did come off of a win last week. But I guess, Gio, for you, how do you see this match going?
I think AC Milan should handle this as business as usual for AC Milan. I know they haven't been of great form either. Spurs are coming off like almost a mentally crippling loss. So I think both teams are kind of weak. But if you want to stack up player by player, I think overall, percentage wise, I think AC Milan has a better squad. I'll say that much, and because of that, I'll go with AC Milan. It'll be a close game. I personally think it'll be a close game. Obviously, playing at the San Siro, I think the crowd definitely helps, and I think they will take the game. I would say 2-0.
Ooh, hey, I like that. Obviously, the home team, this time being AC Milan, will be looking to put a good performance in and hopefully get the win, because obviously there's a return fixture and they're going to have to go back to Spurs and try to get a result there. But obviously we mentioned Bentancur is going to be a big miss, and I think that AC Milan midfield with Tonali, Brahim Diaz, and Rafael Leao, very, very dangerous on their day. And when they are firing, they are a force to be reckoned with, and so they will be an interesting team for Tottenham to face. But Mac, what do you think will take place in this game?
I'm a little bit more of in a toss-up position right now, because both teams, to be completely honest, are not in the greatest position right now, if I remember correctly, for AC Milan. I think that in terms of the last 4 games, they've lost 3, tied 1. So they haven't had the greatest run of form, because I don't recall their fixture if they played this weekend, so I'm not 100% certain there. But overall, I think they're kind of mirrors of each other in their league, their kind of representation of how they played thus far this season, where they can be disappointed that there are some, maybe very few positives. Definitely in terms of the individual attacking talent, they both have abundance of it with Rafael, Harry Kane. You're going to be able to get goals potentially out of key matchups, but the real difference is that in the midfield and defensively, can they kind of be solid enough to be able to kind of make sure the other team isn't doing what they want to be able to do. So that's more so how I look at this individual matchup. Right now, I'm having a closer eye on Tottenham. I'm much more skeptical in terms of their ability to stop an attacking a threat that AC Milan could potentially kind of get at, especially in this first fixture. So I'm with you, maybe not that aggressively with the 2-0 resounding win. I might edge them, but maybe that's just my I do not hate Tottenham bias there. I don't know. Maybe just me.
Okay, it's interesting because I think both teams' first choice goalkeepers are out at this point. Mike Maignan out for AC Milan and Hugo Lloris out for Spurs. And honestly, Forster over the weekend, not the best performance for Spurs, and with that back line that Spurs have at the moment, it's not the most, I guess, secure backline to have. So do see some problems for Spurs upcoming, and so I would also predict a slight advantage for AC Milan. Maybe a 1-0 win here to take back to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and hopefully play that out. And I think they should be okay with that. What do you think, Joe?
It's just funny that you mentioned, Hugo Lloris being out. I don't know how true this is, but as I was sitting on the toilet, as most people do, I was scrolling on my phone. Happy to be on Twitter, and I read that Spurs, because they're obviously short in the keeper section, try to reach out to Ben Foster to come out of retirement, and Spurs was quickly rejected by Ben Foster. So that goes to show, ain't nobody want to play for fucking Spurs. Not even a retired man who is recording a podcast weekly wants to come back out of retirement just to play for Spurs. So yeah, and that includes Champions League football. So I rest my case.
That's
folks.
true.
I rest my case.
Hey, Ben Foster, if you ever want to be in our podcast, you're more than welcome to be in it for sure. But let's move on, guys, to I think another, I guess, the biggest game in the Champions League taking place this week is PSG against Bayern Munich. Now, obviously, PSG with their stars, Bayern Munich really dominating the Bundesliga. It all boils down to sort of who really big favorites for the Champions League this season. Mbappe is coming back from injury. Neymar has been playing well. Messi did miss the game over the weekend with a slight injury, but should be back for PSG. With them firing on all cylinders, do you think there's a chance for Bayern Munich, or am I making it too simplistic and Bayern Munich should have more than enough to put up a fight in this game? What do you think?
I think it's going to be interesting, and this has always kind of been my test for PSG this season, is that I have more questions in regards to the midfield, if they can kind of maintain enough possession, because they've been playing very much a kind of 3-4-3 system with two holding midfielders, neither of which I'm overly impressed in terms of having a dominating performance to be able to retain and keep possession, and to be able to make sure that it's circulated up to their attacking front three. If they're successful on that, they can beat any team in the world. But the tough part is that are they going to be able to do that? And against bigger teams that are kind of beefier, stronger, be able to dominate a midfield, especially if it's a 3-on-2 matchup, which very much in all likelihood would be in this midfield with Goretzka, Kimmich, and Müller maybe dropping into a 10 position. Like I could see that being too much for PSG to be able to kind of build out from. I think this is a fascinating matchup, because if we fast forward 4 months from now, and either of these teams win the Champions League trophy, would I be overly surprised? No. But it'll be interesting to see which team can because if either team come out with a strong performance, a big win, I think they vault themselves in a position potentially to be a favorite, or maybe the favorite to lift the trophy. So it'll be interesting to see how individually these teams do match up, and what happens. The one keynote, I guess, in terms of Bayern that I'll be intrigued, and maybe this is selfishly on my end, but Alphonso Davies playing on the left-hand side in terms of his presence, if he's able to track the run of Messi, because Messi being able to drop more centrally, be able to drop a little bit deeper, that generally catches a lot of left backs out of position, not really able to guard anybody. So utilizing him in maybe a counter press to be able to get up the pitch, or does he tuck more and more and play more as an inverted fullback to cover that Messi spot and help out his midfielders? I think that's an interesting wrinkle in this game to look at. But overall, fascinated by this game and very disappointed that it's on Valentine's Day, because I will be ignoring my wife.
I mean, she should be disappointed for sure, I guess. Yes. Gio, same question though. No Mane for Bayern yet. And obviously with Neuer's injury, Jan Sommer will be starting in goal. How do you see this game taking place?
Look, I think obviously the biggest talk again would be whether or not Mbappe and Messi are healthy. Any side, you take those two out of any side in the world, they're not the same team. Or even if you even take one of them out, they might not be the same team. And although Bayern haven't been, the greatest Bayern that we've seen, over the last decade, it definitely hasn't been up to Bayern standards, I'd say. I'd still take this Bayern side over a Mbappe or Messi-less PSG. I think overall they do still have a very good side, and even without Amane, I think they are more capable of winning this game than again that of a PSG team without those two guys. So it'll come down to how many minutes or whether they get any minutes in this game. But if it's without them, I think the clear favorites still have to be Bayern Munich.
Yeah, it's obviously going to be interesting, the matchups all over the field, how Bayern will be defending that front three PSG have, and also how that midfield is going to try to fare with Kimmich, who should be back for this game, sitting next to Goretzka, and potentially Thomas Müller finding space and behind that midfield too for PSG to sort of facilitate. You obviously have big names that I just mentioned, Mbappe, Neymar, Messi, obviously. But one player I think is going to ball out and is going to have the standout performance over the tie of these two legs is Jamal Musiala. He has so far 10 goals and 7 assists this season for Bayern Munich, and the way he's been playing this season has been impressing a lot of people. And with sort of the freedom that he's going to get once they get on the ball and he picks up the ball in behind that midfield too, his quality is going to show. He's going to have at least a goal and an assist in this game, I think, and he's going to be a standout performer, leading Bayern to get that win over PSG, in my opinion. So I'm very excited to see that. We'll see, obviously, how that goes and give you the review in our next podcast. But let's finally touch on another game taking place this week. Barcelona versus Man U. This all to play for, obviously, for a spot in the Europa League. Gio, Man U, decent run of form. Barcelona, 6 games, 6 wins in 6 games in La Liga. Not the best time to be facing this Barcelona team, but how do you see this game taking place?
I'm nervous, obviously, with how Barca have been playing, and the history of these two teams playing. Barca's seemingly had the upper hand, for most of those beatings. But honestly, I think it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for Man U in particular. I think Barcelona can move the ball well, and tough for Man U in the sense that they won't be touching much of the ball per se. So it kind of works in their favor because they can play that counter-attacking game. So I think they just have to be smart in waiting for their opportunity and not panic that, say them not getting the ball. Obviously, in this fixture, they're going to have a Casemiro. So it's going to be interesting who they partner up with Casemiro in the middle. It'll probably be Fred, is my guess. But yeah, I think they need to be patient, not panic that they're not getting much of the ball, and just wait for the chance. If they wait for the chance, I think Rashford one-on-one has a good of a chance against anyone at this very point in time and at his form. So should be a very interesting game.
Okay, Max, same exact question. How do you see this game playing out?
I think what we should agree on, and both managers should do, and both clubs should really do, is the winner gets De Jong at the end of the season, confirmed, locked up for the next X amount of years. We should just do that right now, have it in writing, and just make sure that we're all on the same page. And we don't have to deal with another summer of that, because that's exactly what's going to happen. And I'm not excited to be able to live through that again. That was very much too taxing and a waste of time overall. So I'd rather have that decided right now. Individually in this game, I think that's completely fair. I think you guys were spot on with your kind of analysis where Barca are going to keep possession, but Manchester United have a game breaker right now that can kind of open up any defense probably in the world right now, and it just needs 1 or 2 opportunities, and he's going to get you 1 to 2 goals. So I think that's going to be the kind of the weighing of the scale for a Barcelona team. The interesting part for Barcelona is they're right now not just first in La Liga, they're the best defense in La Liga, which is quite phenomenal, and definitely not expected if you ask any one of us probably at the beginning of the season, right? So I think that might be the key difference, where I think Manchester United have longer stretches of games where they look like they struggle to score, And against a team that's playing this well defensively, if we compare it to if they were to play against Newcastle, but Newcastle's much better in possession, that's a tough ask for the Manchester United team right now. So I think this might be a little bit too much of a hurdle for them right now. But to their benefit, and I think would be their benefit, is to probably exit this competition, to be honest. I focus more so on the league, lock in a top 4 position, even though it would be nice to take a deeper Europa League run. I think their focus should be more of a guarantee to make sure that they are in that top 4. So I think however well it shakes out for Manchester United, I think you can twist it into a positive. But I think this matchup right now is probably kind of a tier 2 high for them.
Yeah. Honestly, very, very entertaining match that it's going to be. Obviously, there's going to be a return fixture the following week in Manchester. So not just one match, is going to be a interesting tie. Great way to put it, Mac. I think the priority for Man U should still be in the league, given the fact that you've made such a great push in the league to try to come in the top 4 and potentially could be making a way into the top 2 if things go well. But this would be really a marker to how their season has been going, and to see what sort of success they will have moving forward, as obviously Barca is a team in form, one of the teams in Europe in form. So we'll definitely cover that in our next podcast. But on that note, this concludes our podcast for today, guys. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. Our handle is @houseof_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, feel free to get in touch with us via email as well. houseoffooty@hotmail.com is our email. The next time you hear from us will be Friday, when we review all of the midweek games to be played and preview match week 24 of the Premier League. So on that note, thank you, Mac.
Thank you. Peace out.
Thank you, Gio.
Let's go United.
And see you guys Friday.